Sure.
Good morning and welcome everybody. Wanted to thank you for joining us this morning for this information tutorial for the AOAC annual meeting regarding the call for sessions. We're going to cover a lot of things, but I wanted to thank our TPC Chair, Melissa Phillips from NIST, and also our TPC Vice Chair, Emily Rose Britton, who will be joining and facilitating this morning. So, Melissa, if you want to drive a little bit, we're happy to get started.
Sure. Yeah. So we have a few slides to go through that really just highlight the overall process for the call for sessions. And, if you're thinking of submitting to the call for sessions, what that might look like for you. As Dawn said, Emily is going to be watching the chat. So if at any time you have a question, feel free to pop it in the chat, and she will either interrupt me to get me to answer it there, or we'll save some for the end as well. There are only a few slides, so it shouldn't take the whole 30 minutes to get through the slides. So we should have plenty of time for questions at the end. So just to get started, I wanted to share the timeline. So the TPC kind of adjusts this timeline every year, but in general, we are, I don't know if you can see my mouse, probably not. We are sort of in the center of this diagram. The call for sessions is about to open later this week. It'll be open for about a month, and then the TPC will go through its review process and select some sessions to be in the annual meeting. Then the call for speakers will open again for about a month, and then there will be another review round. And then in kind of mid-May-ish, late May, we'll have the program ready to go for the annual meeting in 2026. So I keep talking about the TPC. What is the TPC? The TPC is the Technical Programming Council. That is a committee that's part of the AOAC structure. Currently, our TPC roster is 17 AOAC members. They are selected to have a diverse perspective on different technical areas, different levels of experience within AOAC and within the AOAC technical program. So really trying to capture any type of membership within the organization. The graph on the right kind of highlights the number of TPC members with expertise in different areas. So when we select new members for the TPC, we try to make sure that we have at least a few members that can review proposals and have some level of experience in each of the topic areas that we have in the program. In addition to that, we make sure that we have representation from industry, academia, government, and NGOs as much as we can. And we do take into account both current and former positions of people that apply to be on the TPC. So we do have a pretty broad perspective there as well. And when we say industry, of course, that can mean a lot of different things. So I just wanted to highlight that in this case includes representatives from major food companies, supplement companies, contract testing labs, as well as instrument manufacturers. So we have at least one person from all of those with membership on the TPC currently. So the first step of this whole process is the call for sessions. That's the one that's opening later this week. So we're going to spend most of our time talking about this and then what happens next. When you go to the call for sessions, you will see that there are three choices. You can submit a symposium proposal, a proposal for a roundtable, and a proposal for a workshop. These are the submission formats are a bit different for each one, but they all are part of the same call for sessions. A symposium, if you're not familiar, consists of 1 to 2 chairs and 3 to 4 speakers. Individual speakers will be assigned by the TPC later after papers are submitted to the call for speakers. And each speaker in a symposium gives an oral presentation. Depending on whether there are 3 or 4 speakers, the timing of each speaker's presentation may be a little bit longer or shorter. I should also highlight that all of these will be in person in 2026. There's no virtual component to the meeting. So if you submit something, you are expected to show up at the meeting. And all of the time slots, regardless of which type of session, they are all 90 minutes. So that's what we are working with. To submit a symposium proposal, that requires you to have a title and an abstract for the session. And then also select a technical track. So that goes back to the, dietary supplements, food and nutrition, contaminants, things like that. Those are what we refer to when we mean tracks. You then also have to submit your chair information. So usually it's the person submitting it, and then maybe they have a co-chair in mind. And that is, name, company, email address. And then you also have the option to list up to 4 desired speakers. That those are people that you have identified that may be able to contribute to that session. By submitting those names, it does not guarantee that those people will be selected to be on your session. There are several steps that have to happen after the call for sessions closes for that to be the case. For roundtables and workshops, it's a little more straightforward in terms of the submission process. I think a roundtable is generally 1 to 2 chairs and up to 5 participants who will, sit up in front of the room. There are no individual presentations generally, but these are more discussions, focused discussions around a certain topic. For that, you submit your title, your abstract, and your track, just like with a symposium, chair information in the same way, and your desired participants. For workshops, there are no speakers. So it's really just the chairs that are delivering the content of the workshop. And for those, you have to submit your title, abstract, and track, and also your chair information. So like I said, this call for sessions is opening later this week. It's open for about a month, and then the TPC will be taking all of the submissions and starting our review process. A couple of things I wanted to highlight is that all of the submissions are blinded prior to review. So when the TPC reviews the titles and abstracts, the chair information is blinded. So we don't know who's submitting. And that's, again, just to prevent any kind of favoritism or the opposite of favoritism in the review process. Additionally, new this year, or a change, I should say, from last year, in the past, the roundtable speakers had to submit to the call for speakers and then be selected by the TPC. This year, we've removed that. So the chair will nominate their participants in the submission process, and then AOAC staff will be contacting those recommended participants and confirming their willingness to participate. And then we will gauge the roundtables. We will score the roundtables with that information as to whether or not the speakers have agreed. So I wanted to highlight a bit about how the TPC goes about reviewing and scoring proposals. I'm going to reiterate again that everything is blinded prior to review. So we don't see names of chairs when we are reviewing these. I mentioned that the TPC has a diverse set of expertise. And so we take that track that the chair declares in their submission, and we match that up with members of the TPC that have expertise in that area. Every proposal is reviewed by at least 3 members of the TPC, and their scores are combined for discussion by the full TPC. The TPC members individually score each proposal on a scale of 1 to 5 in 4 categories: scientific novelty, importance and timeliness of the topic to the field, general alignment with AOAC science programs, and then general interest to attendees. I've put a QR code on this slide. If you're not familiar with what AOAC science programs are, you can go to that link and it'll tell you all about the plethora of science programs that AOAC conducts and maintains. So, generally the people attending this meeting are interested in those types of areas. So we try to keep the technical program consistent with those fields of science. So the TPC has about, I don't know, a week or 10 days to do all of the scoring. It is a big lift because we get, oh geez, a lot of sessions submitted every year. And then all of that information is then compiled, and the TPC has a meeting all together where we sit down and go through the compiled scores, and we make decisions about whether to accept or reject the different session proposals. After that, the decisions of the TPC are shared with the chairs. That is going to happen this year in mid-March. So if you do submit a session, you'll find out in mid-March whether or not your session was accepted. And then we wanted to highlight a few kind of best practices if you are selected, and things that you should think about for next steps. The first step is to contact those proposed speakers that you submitted with your abstract, and encourage them to submit an abstract to your accepted session during the call for speakers. This is really important because, as I said, the TPC will use that information, but we can only accept speakers to the program who have submitted an abstract in the call for speakers. We also suggest that you consider meeting with proposed speakers to ensure that anything they do submit would be aligned with the session you've proposed. The worst thing that can happen is somebody's excited and they submit an abstract, and then it doesn't actually fit well with the vision of the session, and therefore, because everything is blinded, the TPC finds that it doesn't fit, and that's unfortunate. So talk with speakers, make sure they're not duplicating their content in the proposed session. If your session is accepted and you also wish to speak and not just moderate, then you also need to submit an abstract on your own behalf to be able to speak in the session. New this year, we are asking chairs to review the abstracts that speakers submit to their session. So if you're a chair and your session is accepted, please mark your calendar that in late April, you will be asked to review the handful of abstracts submitted to your symposium. And then lastly, just remember that once you submit this, if accepted, you are responsible for this session through the annual meeting. So look for emails from Lauren and Dawn and others from AOAC with any kind of updates, and make sure that you're communicating with AOAC and with your speakers so that your session can be a success. The next part of the next steps is the call for speakers. So that's going to open in late March. And again, it's really important that anybody that wants to contribute to this program needs to submit an abstract for the call for speakers. There are two, I wanted to make sure to highlight that we have two different types of symposia that we accept in the program. The first is what we've been talking about in the call for sessions. All of those accepted symposia will be part of the organized program. So the chair has prepared an abstract, submitted that, it's been reviewed by the TPC. The other part of the program that's important and that maybe people don't know is a big part of the program is contributed symposium. So there is a possibility, if you have an idea or some research you've been working on and you want to contribute that to the program, but you don't have enough for a full session on your own, you can submit an abstract where you will be grouped with related topics to create a new symposium. During that process, you can also indicate that you may be willing to chair that session. So those are completely put together by the TPC. Again, just highlighting when a session is accepted, all the speakers that you identify in your original submission must submit to the call for speakers. They should identify your session as the one they want to be part of. And if you, as the chair, would like to be a speaker in your session, you also have to submit an abstract on your own behalf. Again, highlighting everything is blinded prior to review. So the technical content of each abstract is reviewed independent of the person who has submitted it, or independent of that information. We do, after the fact, go back and check against the list that was submitted during the call for sessions, and highlight the speakers who were originally requested. So that is a factor. It is just not the only factor. And again, we're inviting the chairs this year to review and score any submission to their organized symposium. That is all I have. Just some highlights here. The QR code will take you to the call for sessions page on the AOAC website, where all of this information is laid out in text. So if you would like to review it again, it's there. The key dates are here as well. This Thursday, the call for sessions will open, and it will close on February 26th. And if you have additional questions beyond today, feel free to reach out to meetings@aoac.org and they will help you.
Thank you, Melissa. If anybody has a question and they, would prefer to send it, a little bit more privately instead of out to the whole group chat, feel free to send it to me directly, and it will be between us as to who submitted it. I promise. We have a few questions that we commonly get asked that we can answer here today. So we'll go through a few of these, and as questions come up in the chat or to me directly, we will cover them. But the first question that's come through the chat is, Melissa, can you remind everyone again what a grouped symposium would be and who that consists of?
A grouped symposium?
Yeah, that was asked, and I'm assuming it's like what comes from the contributed sessions that are submitted.
I see, like this. Okay, the box on the right.
Yes, I'm assuming that's that was the point of the question, but please elaborate in the chat. Okay, that was a yes. Yeah, that's what the question's about.
Okay, yeah. So essentially, as I said, we encourage people to submit a single paper. It doesn't have to be a full session, and so those come in with a title, an abstract, and then a track, right? A technical track. And so after reviewing these proposals based on their track, then the TPC will take those that score well and put them together based on topic area as best we can. Again, we're at the mercy of what gets submitted. So sometimes it can be a little crazy, but for example, last year, I know we put together a session, maybe 2 sessions on PFAS. We put together some botanical related sessions that may have been botanical identity. So we try to read through and think about what papers could go together to put together a 90-minute symposium. And then those would just be grouped together. And we as the TPC generally make up a generic title. And then we try to identify a chair who can, be the responsible party for the symposium. And that chair often will come up with a better title and maybe an abstract after talking with some of the speakers. And, so it fits well with the rest of the program. I hope that helped answer the question.
Yes, thank you. So there was one thing I wanted to mention here as well, as we're talking about how, the structure of a symposium. So Melissa mentioned that you can have up to 4 speakers. So that means that there is an opportunity to have 3 speakers if someone prefers in their session. And as the chair of a session, you have the flexibility about how to organize your timing. So for example, if you have 90 minutes and you have 4 speakers that each have a 20-minute presentation, that really only leaves you with 10 remaining minutes to cover some introductions and then also Q&A at the end. And as you imagine, some things often don't go as planned. So if you're budgeted for everyone to have 20 minutes, you do a nice introduction, but then you run out of time before Q&A, that can be a challenge as a chair. So one of the things that you can do as a chair is say to all of your speakers later on in the process is, I would like you all to do 15-minute presentations. That way it leaves you overall with 30 minutes to cover introductions of all of your speakers and set the stage for the context of the symposium, but then also leaves ample time to have Q&A discussion either at the end, or you can allot to have a period of time after each individual talk. So while that specific structure wouldn't necessarily be displayed within, the program at that level of specificity, you can design what happens within your session in your own way. So I wanted to let everyone know that it's up to your discretion as a chair. Okay, so I have a question for you, Melissa. I'll ask this one first. Let's say, we work through all of these reviews blinded, and ensuring that there is fairness in the agenda and that as many people have the opportunity as possible to present. What do we do in instances where potentially there are multiple accepted symposia from an individual person? Do we have a way of identifying if one person has multiple acceptances? And if so, what do we do in those cases?
We have had that in the past. That generally comes out after we decide what to accept. And I think, at least in my time as the chair, we've just had a kind of a frank conversation within the TPC about whether it's too much or not. I think the benefit of blinding is that, if some person submits 3 symposia proposals and they all score well and they're all unique enough, but we don't have, I guess I should back up maybe a little and say that, there are a limited number of time slots available for sessions. So it's generally in the 25 to 30 range total. And so we have to back out of that, some slots for contributed symposia, some slots for roundtables and workshops. And so we try to have a balanced program for the whole week that isn't too heavy on one topic or too heavy on one person or anything like that. But, so if given all of those constraints, we still end up with someone who's proposed 2 or 3 really high quality symposia. That's a conversation we have and determine whether or not we think it's appropriate.
I believe that there was an instance last year where we, while blinded, noticed that there were some common themes later on in the, call for speakers, where there were multiple submissions to different things that all had a very similar content that was being submitted. So I think in that case, we were able to see that, maybe perhaps this is the same individual who's working to try and get in where we can. So we should consider this when, allocating speakers to different sessions and roundtables.
Yeah.
So we do our best. I do have this data available. Thank you, Lauren. So last year for 2025, we had 67 call for sessions, or I think this was the call for symposia. Call for session. Yeah. We had
That's
60,
all of them. Yeah.
Yeah. We had 67 of those that were submitted, and we were able to accept 28 of those. So I just wanted just to give some context into the volume of what's submitted and what we can accept. I thought that would be helpful. Okay. So here's a question for you, Melissa, or perhaps Lauren or Dawn. When a chair has their session or their symposia accepted, when should they register for the annual meeting?
I defer to Lauren and Dawn for that.
Lauren, go ahead.
So our registration prices are currently on our website, but I believe it's we're going to open it on April, I believe. Well, let me double check. Wednesday, April 1st. So when you're accepted mid-March, it won't be open quite yet. But all chairs and speakers and roundtable participants and workshop participants, everyone must register for the annual meeting. So as soon as you get notice, if it's before April 1st, just hold off till April 1st. You will get emails about registering from your chair and from AOAC.
Thank you. And a few more questions that I think I can group together briefly is, how do I help ensure that the speakers that I want get into my symposium? So just to give a high level of best practices for, submitting symposia as a chair. This comes from my experience, and it's not to say that my practice is the best practice, but it's certainly one option that you can consider. So in the past, when I have proposed to chair a symposium, what I have done is I've created an abstract and already had people in mind that I wanted to contribute to this event. So what I do is I've worked to communicate with them beforehand, proposed my theme, gauged their interest in contributing if it were to be accepted, and then included them in those preliminary discussions before I submit my symposium. So once it's accepted, what I do then is I contact all of my proposed speakers, and we have planning meetings to ensure that I know what each person plans to talk about. We work together to review each other's abstracts. So what we have at the end of the day is really a cohesive plan and story to tell within our 90 minutes. Each speaker then, as Melissa's described, is required to submit those abstracts themselves. But all of that sort of preliminary prep within a team helps to ensure that the talk is aligned with the theme of the symposia, so that, and the names were also mentioned early on when the chair submitted as well. So by the time that the TPC reviews, and ultimately the chair will review, the sessions that are the most aligned, the presentations that are the most aligned are ultimately the ones that have the highest likelihood to score well. And then once they are accepted, ideally, that would be great, and you can proceed with your plans. But in the instance where perhaps a paper or an abstract is not accepted, and maybe somebody else gets added in, or maybe you have one less speaker than originally planned, then the chair has the opportunity to bring in this new person and ensure that what the story they have, really aligns with the group that they have, so that by the time the annual meeting comes, what the audience sees is a well-prepared, cohesive, nice flow of a 90-minute symposium. So that's what I've found works really well for, presentations, but also for roundtable sessions as well. You can't do enough. There's not enough preparation that can be done. So do as much as you can ahead of time.
Yeah, and I think that some of the biggest frustrations we've heard since changing the process a bit is from chairs who are frustrated that the speakers they had in mind didn't get put on their session. And a lot of that ends up being because they don't actually submit to the call for speakers. So we don't have anything to review and to assign. So, it is really important for the chair to take responsibility and to, from the very beginning, from the concept of the idea, like Emily said, really work to find those people and work with them to help get the best cohesive 90 minutes you can.
Thank you. I know it's almost time. One last question. Are there any registration requirements for individuals to submit abstracts? For example, will there be a requirement early on for perhaps government employees to register if an abstract is submitted? If there is also a time period in which approval has to be deemed for those with travel restrictions. Perhaps, maybe Lauren, maybe you can comment on that.
I'm sorry, I was just responding to a question in the chat. Can you repeat the second part of that?
So are there any registration requirements for people to submit abstracts?
No.
Reading this word for word. If so, will there be any exceptions for federal employees who often cannot register until after their travel's approved?
I'm going to defer to Dawn on that one.
I think if you can let us know what your challenges are, I think we can try to, depending on the timing, just let us know. And I think we can, those will be on a case by case. I think we can kind of work something out.
So the person who asked that question, please reach out to meetings@aoac.org and you can get a more specific answer to that question. Looks like questions about the due dates for presentations and posters have been answered. Also in the chat, and one individual said that a contributed symposium is a great way for individual speakers to participate. And we agree. So thank you for calling that out. Being included within a symposium isn't the only way to get in and to get on stage at AOAC. So don't forget that that's also an option if you have a great story to tell, but you're not sure if it aligns truly with an existing symposium.
I think that wraps everything up. We're 1 minute after, but that's okay. Thank you all so much. We have recorded this session, so we will be able to put this on aoac.org, so tell your friends. And looking forward to seeing you all in Indianapolis this fall. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa, and thank you, AOAC.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone.
Melissa, and thanks, Emily.
Bye.
And Lauren.